If you're someone who's working hard in the gym, chasing strength gains, or simply trying to preserve muscle mass as you age, this might be one of the most important things you hear today. Because what you eat before you sleep doesn't just affect your digestion, it affects your hormones, your recovery, and even the quality of your sleep. And if you're unknowingly making this one mistake, consuming a food that's been normalized, even marketed as healthy, you're potentially sabotaging your growth hormone release, blunting muscle protein synthesis, and fragmenting the very sleep your body relies on to repair and grow. Most people focus on training harder, lifting heavier, or optimizing supplements when trying to build muscle, but few consider the invisible barrier that might be sabotaging everything: eating the wrong food before bed. Specifically, foods that cause a spike in insulin late at night can significantly suppress the body's natural release of growth hormone, which is one of the most critical drivers of muscle growth and repair. Growth hormone isn't just a luxury for athletes, it's essential for anyone looking to preserve lean mass, improve body composition, or slow aging. And its primary surge happens during the early stages of sleep. That's the window when your body starts healing, rebuilding tissue, and resetting metabolically. But this process is highly sensitive to blood sugar levels and insulin dynamics. When you consume foods that elevate insulin, like high-glycemic carbs or sugar-laden snacks, within an hour or two of sleep, your pancreas gets activated to lower the glucose circulating in your bloodstream. That insulin spike doesn't just clean up the sugar, it sends a signal to your body that you're in a fed state. When the body believes it's in a fed state, growth hormone secretion is blunted. Growth hormone and insulin operate in an inverse relationship. When one is high, the other stays low. So if you're consuming things like cereal, granola bars, flavored yogurts, or even seemingly harmless whole grain toast before bed, you're potentially crushing the one hormonal surge that does more for your physique than any supplement you'll find on a shelf. What's more troubling is that this suppression isn't just acute. Repeatedly consuming insulin-spiking foods before bed can lead to a chronic pattern of lower growth hormone output at night, which translates to slower recovery, less lean muscle retention, and more fat accumulation over time. And it's not just about macronutrients. Timing is everything. You could eat a perfectly balanced meal during the day and support anabolism, but that same meal eaten late in the evening could completely flip the hormonal response you want. This is why intermittent fasting protocols, early time restricted feeding, and overnight fasting windows have gained traction, not because they magically burn fat, but because they align with your body's natural hormonal rhythms. The science is clear that growth hormone secretion occurs in pulses, with the largest happening during the first 2 sleep cycles, which generally occur in the first third of the night. This is also the time when the body enters slow wave sleep, or deep sleep, the phase most associated with physical restoration. Insulin, even in moderate elevations, can interfere with this phase, both by altering neurochemical signals and by shifting the balance of energy metabolism away from fat oxidation and toward glucose storage. This means that not only is growth hormone suppressed, but the quality of sleep itself is degraded, further compounding the recovery deficit. There's also a lesser-known but important link between nighttime insulin levels and the liver's ability to produce IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which works downstream of growth hormone to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and cellular regeneration. If growth hormone is the signal, IGF-1 is the amplifier. But both depend on a metabolic environment that's low in insulin. So again, it's not about eating less, it's about eating smart, and more importantly, eating in a way that supports your body's natural cycles. When those cycles are disrupted by a late-night meal, even if it's small, you could be missing out on hours of potential recovery and anabolic signaling. Athletes often chase marginal gains by tweaking training variables or adding new supplements, but this is one of the few areas where subtracting something, one late-night snack, can unlock disproportionate benefits. It's also why elite performance coaches increasingly treat sleep and meal timing as core pillars of hypertrophy and performance programs. Because if you're serious about muscle growth, you can't afford to ignore the fact that your best anabolic window isn't in the gym, it's in the first few hours of deep, uninterrupted sleep. And nothing shuts that window faster than a surge of insulin when your body is trying to downshift into recovery mode. It's easy to overlook how something as simple as a bowl of oatmeal, a banana, or even a glass of juice before bed can ripple through the body in ways that undermine your recovery and muscle building goals. Most people think of carbs as fuel, and they are, but the timing of when you consume them can determine whether they act as a performance enhancer or a performance disruptor. When consumed too close to bedtime, even otherwise healthy carbohydrates can trigger blood glucose spikes that result in glucose variability, which is one of the most insidious disruptors of sleep quality. The body responds to a sudden rise in blood sugar with a compensatory insulin release, but this roller coaster doesn't just stabilize blood glucose, it sends a cascade of neurochemical signals that directly affect how your brain transitions through the stages of sleep. Sleep is not a static event, it's a dynamic cycle involving light sleep, deep sleep, and REM phases. Each of these plays a vital role in physical restoration, cognitive processing, hormonal regulation, and immune function. When glucose levels rise and fall sharply before or during sleep, the brain senses the disturbance and reacts by altering the architecture of sleep itself. One of the most well-documented consequences is reduced time spent in deep sleep, which is when muscle repair, tissue growth, and the release of growth hormone are at their peak. Even a small but rapid change in glucose levels during the night has been shown to cause micro-arousals, brief awakenings that the sleeper may not even be consciously aware of, but that fragment the continuity of sleep. This kind of fragmentation has compounding effects. Even if total sleep time looks adequate, the quality of that sleep is diminished. And quality, not just quantity, is what drives recovery and muscle adaptation. Fragmented sleep leads to increased cortisol levels the next day, impaired glucose tolerance, reduced insulin sensitivity, and an increased appetite for high-calorie foods, setting you up for a negative feedback loop that makes recovery harder and muscle growth slower. Athletes and active individuals who already place a high demand on their body are particularly sensitive to this. A single night of glucose-induced sleep disruption can translate into a measurable drop in next-day performance and cognitive sharpness. It's also important to understand that glucose variability at night does not just impair recovery, it can also blunt the normal nocturnal dip in core body temperature that's essential for initiating and maintaining deep sleep. Eating carbohydrates too close to bedtime raises your body's metabolic rate slightly as it processes the meal, and this heat production delays the body's cooling process that signals it's time to sleep. The result is longer sleep latency, more time spent tossing and turning before falling asleep, and lighter sleep in the early part of the night. For people who train hard or are trying to increase lean muscle mass, this early part of the night is the most critical window for growth hormone release and anabolic activity. Beyond the hormonal implications, there's also a neurological cost. Spikes and drops in glucose can activate regions of the brain responsible for alertness and arousal. These swings interfere with the production and release of neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA, which are essential for calming the nervous system and transitioning the brain into sleep mode. When these neurotransmitters are disrupted, it becomes harder to cycle through the deeper stages of sleep and harder for the body to engage in the kind of cellular repair that underpins hypertrophy and recovery. This is why metabolic stability during sleep matters just as much as the food choices made during waking hours. The goal isn't to eliminate carbs entirely, but to strategically time their consumption to support, not sabotage, the recovery process. The evidence points toward finishing the last carbohydrate-heavy meal at least 3 to 4 hours before bed, allowing insulin and glucose levels to stabilize and giving the body time to shift toward a hormonal and metabolic profile more conducive to deep sleep. This isn't just about optimizing body composition, it's about respecting the physiology that drives recovery, hormone regulation, and muscle adaptation. Athletes who consistently dial in their evening nutrition find that they wake up not just better rested, but with improved markers of recovery, less soreness, and more consistency in their training outcomes. When glucose stays stable, sleep becomes restorative, and when sleep becomes restorative, muscle growth becomes inevitable. There's a long-standing belief in the fitness and bodybuilding world that consuming protein before bed, especially casein, is beneficial for muscle growth. The logic is simple: give your body a slow digesting source of amino acids to keep feeding muscle protein synthesis through the night. But this view, while rooted in some truth, often ignores the complexity of human physiology, particularly how timing and context influence the hormonal environment needed for true recovery and muscle repair. Protein, and especially certain types like casein, is not inherently harmful before bed, but when consumed at the wrong time or in the wrong metabolic state, it may not have the muscle-preserving benefits that people assume. In some cases, it could even work against the very goals it's meant to support. The first layer of complexity is how protein affects insulin. While carbohydrates are known to spike insulin, many don't realize that protein can also stimulate insulin secretion, particularly when consumed in isolation or in large quantities. This insulin response is more pronounced with certain amino acids, especially leucine and the branched-chain amino acids commonly found in protein supplements. When insulin rises close to bedtime, it can interfere with the body's ability to release growth hormone during the first deep sleep cycles. As a result, even though you're providing amino acids for repair, you're simultaneously suppressing the very hormonal signals that would maximize their use. Another issue with late-night protein intake, particularly in the form of shakes or supplements, is that it keeps the digestive system active at a time when it should be winding down. Sleep is a systemic reset. When digestion is still in full swing, especially with slower digesting proteins like casein, the body has to divert resources toward processing food rather than shifting into deep parasympathetic recovery. This leads to a subtle but real increase in core body temperature, which can disrupt the onset of deep sleep and interfere with sleep cycles that are most beneficial for muscle recovery. The irony is that the effort to support overnight muscle growth might be undermining the very sleep that powers it. Additionally, the belief that constant amino acid availability is essential for hypertrophy doesn't align with newer findings in muscle protein synthesis. It turns out that muscles don't need to be flooded with protein 24/7 to grow. In fact, spacing out protein feedings and allowing periods of low amino acid availability may enhance muscle responsiveness to subsequent protein intake, a phenomenon known as the muscle full effect. When the muscle is saturated with amino acids for too long, its sensitivity to new amino acids decreases. This means that constant intake, especially late at night, may not be giving you an advantage at all and may actually lead to diminishing returns. Casein protein in particular is often marketed as ideal for nighttime because of its slow absorption rate, but just because a protein digests slowly doesn't mean it's automatically more effective for overnight repair. The slow digestion can delay the onset of muscle protein synthesis and may result in a lower overall anabolic response compared to faster digesting proteins when consumed at more optimal times. Furthermore, the idea that muscle breakdown occurs rapidly during an overnight fast has been overstated. The body is quite apt at maintaining lean mass during overnight periods of fasting, especially if total daily protein intake is adequate. What truly drives muscle loss is not skipping a bedtime shake, but poor sleep quality, chronic stress, and under-recovery over time. There's also the matter of gut health and circadian rhythms. The gut has its own clock system that responds to feeding and fasting cues. Eating too close to bedtime, even if it's just protein, disrupts the natural rhythm of the gut, which can lead to digestive discomfort, reduced nutrient absorption, and systemic inflammation over time. If the goal is longevity and sustainable muscle maintenance, not just short-term gains, then respecting these biological rhythms becomes even more important. The benefits of protein can be fully realized during the day when the body is more primed to digest, assimilate, and respond to nutrient intake. What emerges from all this is a more nuanced view. It's not about how much protein you take before bed, it's about how well your entire system is set up to utilize that protein. Consuming protein earlier in the evening, rather than right before sleep, allows the body to process the nutrients while still preparing for restorative sleep. Aligning protein timing with circadian and metabolic cues leads to better hormonal balance, more efficient muscle repair, and higher sleep quality, all of which combine to support long-term muscle growth and health. The human body operates on a finely tuned circadian rhythm, a biological clock that governs countless physiological processes from hormone secretion to digestion to cellular repair. Eating too close to bedtime, especially foods that require significant metabolic processing, can disrupt this natural rhythm in ways that negatively impact muscle recovery, strength gains, and long-term metabolic health. One of the key systems affected by late-night eating is the endocrine system, particularly the production of testosterone and other anabolic hormones essential for muscle growth and regeneration. While many people focus on total calories and macros, they often ignore how the timing of their last meal directly interferes with their body's hormonal balance during the night. Testosterone production is closely linked to the sleep-wake cycle. Levels peak during REM sleep and gradually decline throughout the day. This nocturnal surge in testosterone, much like the release of growth hormone, is heavily dependent on high-quality, uninterrupted sleep. However, when food is consumed too late, especially meals rich in fats or carbohydrates, the digestive process can interfere with sleep architecture, delaying the onset of REM and deep sleep stages where hormonal pulses are most pronounced. This means that even if testosterone production is not completely shut down, it is blunted or shifted out of sync with the body's optimal rhythm, leading to lower overall hormone availability for repair and muscle building. There's also a thermogenic component to food consumption. Eating triggers a rise in core body temperature due to the metabolic energy required for digestion and nutrient absorption. This increase in body heat directly conflicts with the natural drop in temperature that occurs at night to prepare the body for sleep. When the body remains warmer than it should be, it has trouble entering deep sleep, the very phase where testosterone and other anabolic hormones are most actively secreted. This thermic effect is even more pronounced when the evening meal includes heavy proteins or fats, which require longer digestion times. The resulting physiological tension prevents full immersion into the parasympathetic rest and recover state that the nervous system relies on for effective muscle restoration. Beyond testosterone, late eating can disrupt melatonin production, the hormone that governs the onset and quality of sleep. When food is consumed late, especially under artificial lighting, melatonin secretion is delayed. Since melatonin doesn't just signal sleep but also plays a role in regulating the immune system and mitochondrial function, the effects go far beyond a simple delay in falling asleep. A disrupted melatonin cycle can impair mitochondrial energy production in muscle cells, reducing their ability to recover, adapt, and grow after training stress. When mitochondrial efficiency declines, recovery slows, and the body becomes more prone to fatigue, injury, and overtraining. Circadian disruption caused by late meals doesn't just affect nighttime hormones, it carries over into the next day's hormonal profile. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, typically peaks in the early morning to help us wake up and feel alert. However, when the circadian rhythm is thrown off by mistimed eating, the cortisol peak may be delayed or exaggerated, creating a hormonal environment that promotes muscle breakdown rather than synthesis. Chronically elevated cortisol suppresses testosterone, reduces insulin sensitivity, and accelerates muscle catabolism, all outcomes that counteract the goals of anyone looking to build or preserve lean mass. Even metabolic flexibility, the ability of the body to switch efficiently between burning glucose and fat, is negatively affected by late eating. When the body spends the night processing a late meal, especially one rich in carbohydrates, it delays the shift into fat oxidation that typically happens overnight. This compromises not only body composition goals but also metabolic efficiency, as the body becomes less adept at using stored fat for energy during fasted periods. Over time, this metabolic inflexibility contributes to insulin resistance, systemic inflammation, and diminished muscle recovery. These effects are especially harmful for athletes and aging individuals who rely on efficient metabolic processes to maintain lean body mass and recover quickly between training sessions. Late-night eating also affects the liver, which plays a central role in regulating energy balance and detoxification during sleep. The liver follows a circadian rhythm as well, and prefers to engage in cleanup and regeneration during the night. When digestion is still active due to a late meal, the liver has to shift focus away from its restorative functions toward managing nutrient metabolism and glucose balance. This reduces its capacity to support overnight detoxification and hormone clearance, both of which are crucial for maintaining optimal testosterone and growth hormone function. The downstream effect is a hormonal environment that is less favorable to hypertrophy and more inclined towards stagnation or regression in performance outcomes. Sleep is one of the most powerful yet underrated tools for muscle growth and physical recovery, but its full benefits are only realized when the structure of sleep remains intact. This structure, known as sleep architecture, is made up of a series of repeating cycles that include light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. Deep sleep, in particular, is where the most profound physical repair takes place. It's when growth hormone surges, tissues rebuild, and muscles begin the recovery process after stress from training. However, late-night eating, especially meals that include processed foods, high sugar content, or heavy fats, can interfere with this architecture and diminish the effectiveness of sleep as a recovery tool. Over time, these disruptions can accelerate muscle loss, contribute to metabolic dysfunction, and increase the risk of sarcopenia, a condition marked by age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. When food is consumed too close to bedtime, the body diverts energy and focus away from restorative functions and toward digestion. This physiological activation can delay the onset of deep sleep and decrease the overall amount of time spent in that critical stage. Even if someone logs 8 hours in bed, the quality of those hours is often compromised when the digestive system is still actively breaking down food. This fragmented or shallow sleep has direct consequences on the body's anabolic environment. It leads to a reduced secretion of growth hormone and other regenerative hormones, meaning the muscles are not receiving the full support they need to repair, grow, or adapt to training stress. Disrupted sleep architecture caused by late-night eating also leads to increased levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol naturally follows a diurnal rhythm, peaking in the early morning and tapering off at night. However, when sleep is disturbed, cortisol levels can remain elevated throughout the night and into the next day. Chronic elevations in cortisol not only impair muscle recovery but also actively promote muscle breakdown. It's a catabolic hormone by nature, and when it dominates the hormonal landscape, it can override the effects of testosterone and growth hormone, shifting the body into a state of degradation rather than growth. Inadequate or poor quality sleep due to nighttime eating can also blunt insulin sensitivity, making it more difficult for the body to effectively manage glucose and use it to replenish muscle glycogen stores. Over time, reduced insulin sensitivity leads to greater fat accumulation, especially visceral fat, which further promotes inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. Inflammation itself can directly impair muscle protein synthesis and accelerate muscle degradation. This is particularly concerning for individuals over the age of 35, who already face a natural decline in anabolic hormone levels and muscle building efficiency. When compounded by sleep disruptions, the aging process is accelerated and muscle maintenance becomes increasingly difficult. The connection between sleep fragmentation and sarcopenia has been well documented in both athletic and general populations. Multiple studies have shown that individuals who consistently sleep poorly have lower muscle mass, reduced grip strength, and impaired physical performance compared to those who maintain healthy sleep cycles. This muscle loss doesn't happen overnight, but is the result of a slow erosion that occurs when the body's ability to recover is impaired night after night. What's often missed is that this process can be set in motion simply by the timing of food intake. A seemingly innocent snack late at night like a handful of chips or a protein bar can disrupt blood sugar balance, elevate insulin, delay melatonin production, and lead to shallow or inconsistent sleep. Late eating doesn't just impact the depth of sleep but also its timing and consistency. People who eat late are more likely to go to bed later and experience irregular sleep patterns. These irregularities compound over time, leading to sleep debt, circadian misalignment, and diminished hormonal coordination. The result is a body that becomes increasingly inefficient at recovering, adapting, and building muscle, regardless of how intense the training sessions are or how disciplined the diet is during the day. Consistency in sleep timing is just as important as consistency in training, and one of the easiest ways to ensure this consistency is to allow sufficient time between the last meal and sleep onset. Even when calorie intake and macronutrient ratios are optimized, late-night eating can still negate the benefits if it comes at the cost of restorative sleep. Without the uninterrupted cycles of deep and REM sleep, the signals that trigger hypertrophy remain weak, and the body shifts into a survival state rather than a growth-oriented one. For anyone pursuing muscle growth, longevity, or improved body composition, protecting the architecture of sleep should be a non-negotiable priority, and that begins with understanding how something as routine as a late-night meal can quietly erode the foundation of recovery. In the pursuit of muscle growth, hormonal optimization, and quality sleep, people often search for what to add: new supplements, more protein, better workouts, but rarely consider what to remove. The truth is, removing just one habit from your nightly routine can unlock disproportionate benefits for your entire body. One of the most impactful changes you can make is eliminating a specific category of food before bed: ultra-processed carbohydrates. These are foods that digest quickly, spike insulin rapidly, and trigger a cascade of metabolic disruptions that interfere with everything your body is trying to achieve overnight. By cutting out these foods just a few hours before sleep, you allow your hormonal systems to reset, your sleep cycles to stabilize, and your muscle repair processes to operate without interruption. Ultra-processed carbs include things like cookies, crackers, pastries, cereal, chips, and many snack bars that masquerade as health foods. They're often consumed for convenience or out of habit, especially late at night when energy dips or cravings strike. These foods tend to have a high glycemic index, meaning they cause a rapid rise in blood glucose levels. This spike is followed by a sharp drop, creating a rebound effect that often occurs